guys, Agent Whitehack here. So today I'm going to be showing you how I ink things, since this tutorial has been by popular request. Keep in mind this is only how I personally ink things, which means my own personal preferences and style is accountable in the inking process. I also tend to ink differently depending on what I'm drawing, so here I'll show you how I ink a quick sketch, a cartoony drawing, and a full finished piece. My full drawings and more cartoony pieces also have different aesthetics. Typically with more stylized art, less is more, so I'll be using that principle, while my anime art is a little more detailed. Also keep in mind this is a paint tool site only tutorial, so even though these techniques apply to all programs, the brush settings and tips do not. So step 1 is you'll obviously want to create the sketches for your drawings. I usually do that in Photoshop, but my Photoshop lags horribly when I record, so I use Side-A-Day. Once your sketch is finished, typically you'll want to create a new layer over your sketch layer. Let's call this one Inky Ink. And then you'll want to lower the opacity of your sketch layer. I usually lower mine about 30% or so because I like to make a lot of corrections in ink. The next decision you'll want to make is which brush you use. I usually use the Crayon tool for quick colored sketches. Here's my Crayon tool settings. The brush tool for cartoony stuff. Here's my brush tool settings. And the pencil tool for my most detailed inking. I also put links to these pen pressure settings in the description. Now it's time to ink. It's important to remember inking and outlining can be two very different things. I define outlining to be simply tracing your sketch with one uniform pen size, adding no depth. While inking is considering the depth and shadows of the object you're inking. You might even incorporate shadows or dark colors into your ink when you ink. One method isn't necessarily better than the other, but for illustrated pieces, depth usually adds intrigue to your piece. For brush size, I work with a variety of brush sizes. It depends on what I'm going for, really. On my anime pieces, I usually use thinner lines, since I use pretty vibrant colors and I like to add depth through shading rather than lines per se. But with sketchy and toony drawings, the shading is more minimalistic, so the lines typically are a bit thicker and have more depth. So basic rule of thumb for me, cartoony drawings have about a 10 pixel brush size, sketches have a 6 pixel brush size, and anime drawings have a 2 to 3 pixel brush size. This also depends on what size canvas you work in, which mine is usually 2000 by 3000 pixels with a DPI of 150 to 300, depending on how detailed I need the art to be. For prints, I usually bump that DPI up to like 3000. I'm not even sure what that does, but it seems to look nicer. My ratios for canvases are usually 1 to 1.5 if you want a larger working space. This keeps with the principles of landscape and portrait work, which usually fit how I draw characters and scenes. It also fits with the rule of 3s, which is the ability to divide your canvas into 6. This determines your focal points and makes it easier to map out composition. This applies less with square canvas pieces, which I don't do a lot of in general. Alright, on to tips or suggestions. A lot of this stuff I rambled on about in the recording, but it ended up being like 2 hours because I'm slow. So here we go. Lightning round tips! First one is to check your pen pressure settings. Most decent tablets have the capability to change the speed of your cursor and the general pen pressure settings when you go into the tablet settings. Mine does, but I just kept it at the factory defaults because they worked okay for me. Second tip, if you're using Psy mostly, is to go in and play around with your program pen pressure. I know Manga Studio also has this option, and Photoshop to an extent, but I have never been able to get my Photoshop pen pressure right. That's why I ink in Psy. Anyway, you can adjust part of the pen pressure in Psy by adjusting the min size of your tool, located here. I usually set mine to 0. The other pen pressure factor is the stabilizer, the best friend of the artist with shaky hands. I set mine at 15 since past S1 it lags, and I don't like the lag. Number 2! Shortcuts and hotkeys. Okay, I only use 2 to 3 shortcuts in my work. Here's a list. And here's a list of the shortcuts normal artists may use. Play around with this so your shortcuts help you speed up your art process. I'll also have a link to this stuff in the stash folder in the description. Has anyone noticed that I have a difficult time saying the word description? I don't know why. Also, here's Greb's pen pressure settings, which are the ones I use for most of my other brushes that I didn't mention in this video. Have fun! Next step. Cool Psy things and hacks and tricks that pretty much everyone needs to know if they're using Psy. If you click here, you can turn any brush into an eraser. This saves a huge amount of time. I'm sure there's also a hotkey for this. If you go up here next to the stabilizer, you can invert your drawing and make sure the focal proportions are right and jump. I've been using this a lot lately, since my drawings usually look like trash inverted. So this is super helpful. Next! Methods for making circles! First one is to simply click with a solid brush and make a circle. This is a method I use most of the time because I'm lazy. And then sometimes I'll get like you know, same brush, click the eraser setting, and then just erase the middle if I just want a solid outline circle. But the other one is to create a line art layer here, and then hold down delete. And you want to do this with your mouse. And then just press delete as it rotates the canvas and goes in a circle! How innovative! Next is line art layers. Line art layers provide, well, line art tools. It's great if you're going for a clean outline look. I also use these brushes for architecture and backgrounds as well as straight lines. You can also make a simple straight line in a drawing by clicking with your brush where you want the line to start, holding down shift, and clicking where you want the line to end. It's magic! Not really. You can create shapes and graphics by using the selection tools and filling in stuff. This is how you select line art or ink to color. You just go in here and use your selection tool here. If it selects inside your line art has holes in the edges. You can correct that by filling in the holes with the ink tool, or if you're dumb like me, you can use this cool selection pen. There's also a deselection pen, yeah! Once the outside of your lines is selected, you go up to the top and go to Selection, Inverse, and then your line art will be selected. Paint bucket or color in the area on a new layer below your line art, and then lock it by clicking Preserve Opacity. You can also color line art itself by locking the line art layer and coloring on that layer. Isn't that pretty? That's all I have for tips, but there's a ton more tips you can do inside, so I'd suggest following the links in the description for some other tutorials that I suggest. These are pretty much where I learned this stuff, so they're very helpful. Yeah, I had to turn off all of my external fans and stuff that keep my room cool, and that's really the only way my laptop doesn't overheat, so it's definitely going to overheat a little bit, and you'll probably hear that because my microphone is... Anyway, so, the first step we're going to want to take in inking, and we're going to be starting on the toon sketch. I'm sorry if this is terribly unorganized. This is unscripted right now, so I'm just gonna be yelling a lot. So that's fun. Let's see. Okay, so with inking, I typically start on hands because hands are one of the most challenging things to draw, and if I don't have any complicated lines already done, it's easier for me to draw hands for some reason, but our character here doesn't have hands showing. That's not convenient at all. So I'm just gonna start on the face. Like I mentioned in the beforehand voiceover thing, I usually use brush tool to ink, and I usually like to turn up the density all the way and have the size on 6. So it's gonna look a little bit like this. Isn't that pretty? I might edit the size a little bit because I'm working with a bigger resolution than I normally do, but it's gonna look something like that. And that's really pretty, isn't it? It's very nice. So when I ink cartoony stuff, I usually take long strokes. And then getting back to the part about depth. See this part here that I just filled in? That's an area that would be darker than the rest because it's hair creating a shadow. So whenever you see like anime or just toon artists who have these little black triangle things, that's what they're doing. They're trying to create depth within the image. And personally, I think it's a pretty effective method. I do it a lot, both with like cartoony art and anime things, so that's what I'm doing here. And you're just gonna want to use quick movements whenever you're actually inking. I usually will have to undo and erase a little bit until I get the result I like because I have really shaky wrists. That's why my stabilizer is up here at 15. And it'll usually just take me a few tries, but guys, trust me, if you want good ink results, time commitment is kind of gonna be a thing until you get faster at it, which I'm still not fast at inking. I'm very slow. So at some points I'll probably speed up this video just to make it easier on you guys since I'm going to be inking. Another thing you can do with ink's drawings, if you want something to be symmetrical and you're lazy like me, is you can just select whatever you want to copy and then just paste a new one and then take the transform tool and just mirror it. That way you don't have to draw two of the thing, and that way it's nice and symmetrical. And especially for cartoony drawings, I like doing this because I feel like you just want a decent amount of symmetry for that kind of art. It's a very clean art style. Style is going to be done with the Crayon tool, and this is the kind of tool I use whenever I want to do kind of quick ink. I use this pen tool or Crayon tool for anime fusions because I like doing those rather quickly, and I like to keep them more of a conceptual style rather than a flat ink style because that takes longer, especially with the anime drawings I do, and I just really like the aesthetic of this tool. I usually use a red or a dark orange whenever I use this tool because it's just super appealing. It just looks really nice, guys. So whenever I use this tool, I'm a little bit less careful about how detailed I am because it's supposed to be sketchy. So let's just go in and I'll plow through this. I'll probably speed this one up a little bit more, that way we can have more focus on this last anime drawing. Been waiting for. It's time for the anime style inking. So for this, like I mentioned before, I usually use like a 3-inch brush, and I typically go in and start with the hands first. And the other thing I like to do for hands is just to go in and refine the hand after I do the sketch and right before inking. This makes literally no sense, but it just, like, it's mentally easier for me to do this. It makes me actually care about the hands and stuff. Because otherwise I'm like, oh look, it doesn't look so bad with the sketch, and then I actually go in to do the hands and I'm like, oh, just kidding, that looks horrible. I don't know. I'm not making sense today. Sorry, my art is so pixelated right now. Since I'm drawing 3 things on one canvas, I was lazy and I just decided to not have a very high canvas resolution or size. For canvas resolution and size advice, click on a video that isn't this, because I'm bad at that. Side note, this is a cool little thing that I do whenever I ink fabric. I will usually put a little line in here, so then I can go and shade that in later, and it just creates more depth. It's just a weird little stylistic thing that I do that I think is nice and fun. I got it from another artist, I can't remember who right now, but it always looks cool in their work, so yeah. Another side note on inking fabric, less is more, especially for an anime style. It depends what you're going on. If you're going for more of a shonen anime style, or shoujo, which is more of the kind of stuff I do, then less is definitely more with fabrics. If you're going for more of a seinen style, then you can get pretty detailed with fabrics, because seinen, by definition, is just a more realistic style, especially if it's like ink heavy. This is more of an outlining thing that I'm doing here right now, which I will add more depth later, but I'm just kind of doing the initial stuff right now. But I see a lot of people, including myself when I started out, I was horrible about this, just add way too much to fabric. Where with fabric, you really just want to study how fabric folds and just how fabric works in general, and then emulate that. But like, don't put too many detailed folds into it, because pretty much one fold with fabric is gonna sell what the fabric or clothing is doing way better than like some intricate series of folds, because if you're doing a style that's this stylized, it's gonna look really, really overkill, and it's just not gonna be as appealing. So less is more. Learn your style, learn what you're going for, and just work on that. Figure out what you want to do in that area. It's again kind of the less is more situation, but this time it really applies to whatever style you have. I ink hair in a variety of ways. Some are more anime, some are more realistic. It kind of depends on what I'm feeling for that particular drawing and just what I'm feeling that day, but the main idea with inking hair, especially in an anime style, is you want to have the strands and clumps look realistic and like they have weight behind them. And what I mean by that is hair, especially the hairstyle I'm going for in this video because I have freaking Farrah Fawcett hair, it's very clumpy and fluffy, and that's kind of the way I style it, but it has weight behind it. And if your character, say, let's do a little doodle over here. Say they had more flat, stringy hair. You might draw the bangs kind of straight across, and then draw the hair more stringy and flat. And this all applies to like whatever kind of hair your character has. So basically the idea when you're inking hair is if it's fluffier hair, you would want to draw it fluffy. If it's stringier hair, you want to draw it stringy. If it's wavy, wavy, curly, curly, and so on. I'll probably do an individual hair drawing tutorial in general eventually because I really do like drawing hair and I find it fun, and I just kind of feel like doing a tutorial about that because it's kind of too much to just cover an inking tutorial. But the one thing you do want to emphasize in inking when you ink hair is the flowiness, because hair has a tremendous ability to emphasize motion in a drawing. Because if your character is running like mine is here, their hair will 100% be moving. Since my hair is kind of mid-range in length, you're gonna see it moving, and the flowiness of their hair is gonna need to match their movement, right? So you're gonna want to nail the motion of the hair. And a lot of that has as much to do with the sketch and just the way you draw the hair in general as the way you ink the hair. But you're gonna want to get down that flow, because it really helps emphasize the motion of your character. If the wind is moving, but you go and you have your character and the wind is moving that way, and their hair is just like, and like their other clothes are moving. Say you have like a jacket and the collar is flying back and the whole jacket itself is flying back, but they have like a bob and their bob is like this. Like, what? No. What you're gonna want to do with that hair is, if your clothes are moving that much, your hair certainly will. So the bangs are gonna gust up in the air, and so is the rest of the hair. And see how much that already adds to the effectiveness of the wind in that drawing. It makes it more dynamic and more interesting to look at. And let me tell you, if you have hair that's moving around in the wind, that is extremely fun to color and shade and play around with, because it creates more depth to your hair already. So that's just my personal opinion on hair and how I do it and stuff. I'm by no means an expert at this stuff, but that's just personally how I do it, and I find that it makes some fairly nice hair. Beautiful face. Okay, just kidding. Adobe covered over it. Chris, no, come back. Chris, my husbando. I hear you singing now. Open your thing in Photoshop. And how I do the lace thing and why I made them on a new layer is, now if you have Photoshop again, I think there's a way to do this inside, but I don't know. Anyway, so your laces are on a completely new layer. You're going to want to go through, you're going to want to color them white. How you do that is you lock the layer and then you just literally cover over it. So once you have that layer locked, just color over your little laces. Then you double click on your layer. I use Photoshop CS5, by the way. And then you're going to want to go through and just select stroke. I already have it kind of automatically on stroke. And then you can kind of select your edge thickness. And then it looks like you have drawn very detailed lace things. So then you're going to want to create a new layer over that. Press Shift and hold down on both layers, and you're going to want to press CTRL plus E, and that merges them together. So now that's like one static layer. And you're not going to want to merge this with the main ink, because when you color that layer, whatever color you want your laces to be, maybe it's already white, you're going to want to like select multiply or overlay and then color over these so they become the color you want to color. You made it to the end! That's amazing! All joking aside, I hope you guys got something out of this video. The reason I've been putting off making tutorials for so long is I'm not great at it, so please give me feedback on how I can improve my presentation. The goal of these videos is to spread the knowledge of the digital arts, so I want to do that as effectively as possible. Also, tell me which tutorial you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and remember, whole wheat is the healthiest loaf.